Hard to believe, but we're approaching the 1 year anniversary of Roe v. Wade finally being chucked to the ash heap of history where it long belonged. And now we're seeing states across the nation come up with their various regulations and provisions, and in some ways, newfound freedoms with regard to abortion. States like California, New York, and Maryland, they've actually made it even more accessible and enshrined the so called right to abortion in their constitutions. Other states are actually following Alabama's suit that started all of this a year ago with regard to their own heartbeat bills or other regulations on this ghoulish procedure. Joining us now to discuss the latest in this realm is Delano Squires. He's a research fellow for life, religion, and family over at the Mighty Heritage Foundation. Hey, Delano, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Larry, thanks for having me.
I know you were just writing about Nebraska. They've come up with their own heartbeat bill. Is this similar to the ones that we've seen in Florida and in Texas and other states?
Yes, that's correct. So Nebraska's bill, as first proposed, would ban abortion after fetal heartbeat can be detected. So that's around 6 weeks. The issue there is that one of the state senators, and Nebraska has a single, it's a unicameral, elected body. So they call everyone a state senator. Merv Ripert, he co-sponsored the bill, which would, again, ban abortion after about 6 weeks. And then a few weeks later, he walked it back and now wants to change it to a 12-week ban after consultation with some of his peers. That would be better than what the state has now, which is a 20-week ban, but obviously not as good as a heartbeat ban, which would be, again, around 6 weeks. So I'm hoping that they reverse course there. Because heartbeat is not radical at all, and it shows that life actually is worth protecting and preserving. And I hope that the Cornhusker state would heed that message.
There is, I mean, what we are seeing, as I just laid out, is that each state is going through this. They're initiating their own restrictions, or in some cases, loosening restrictions on abortion. Because now it is in the state's purview to do such after Roe v. Wade was discarded. Delano, is there something to the argument, though, that we're now going to have this patchwork across the country that depending on where a woman happens to have been born, they are under very different restrictions with regard to this issue?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, some will see this as an improvement of having, abortion sort of seen as a federal right, right? So now states get to decide. I certainly think that the protection of life should be a federal standard across the country. We can't talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness without first addressing life. So I hope we go in the opposite direction in terms of national protections for life. But now with Roe being struck down, it gives states like Texas and Texas had a ban previously, but Nebraska and Florida an opportunity to create laws that better reflect the values of their residents and constituents.
See, and I find this to be a much more interesting and fundamental sort of exploration of conservative position on life and the abortion issue. For the longest time, I think pro-life Republicans or conservatives would just say offhandedly, well, it should be up to the states on abortion. It should be up to the states. But I think what we were really saying was it shouldn't be up to the Supreme Court. Right. In other words, it was enshrined as a God-given right protected by the Constitution with Roe v. Wade. Everybody knew that was ridiculous. But we really don't want each state in the long run to have this patchwork. Ultimately, ideally, the federal government will enshrine something with regard to the protection of life that applies to all 50 states. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I hope that's the ultimate outcome. And I think what the Supreme Court decision made all of us do is to reconsider what we mean when we use the word right. All right. So in our founding documents, rights come from our Creator. And the thing with rights is that rights always come with corresponding obligations. So if you make the argument that a woman has a right to kill her child, right, sometimes the left uses euphemisms like terminate a pregnancy, like they're logging off of a Zoom meeting, right? So I'm just ending this meeting. But when they say terminate a pregnancy, that means kill a child. Well, if that actually is a right, then that means that an unborn child has an obligation to have its life taken. And I don't think that they actually want to make that argument. And that's why they shroud it in all different types of bureaucratic lingo and euphemisms.
Yeah. So I guess this is where I find this frankly more interesting than discussing and exploring where each state is right now in terms of the progress of their legislation, because I don't disagree with you. I think that we should have a federal standard. So no matter where you live, no matter where a baby happens to be conceived and
Mhm.
the progress of their development in the womb, they should be protected by the federal government. As you said, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But when you see a state like New York and California go so far to the extreme in the other direction to
Mm.
allow abortion up to the moment of birth versus states who merely just want to, draw the line at a heartbeat, it feels like that's irreconcilable at the federal level.
I agree, and it's unfortunate. Many people will be familiar with the John Adams quote when he talked about the system of government we have, and Adams said that our system is meant for moral and religious people, and it is wholly unfit for any other. I think what we're seeing now is the consequence of becoming an immoral and irreligious country, and that's what you see in states like New York, or even a couple years ago in the state of Virginia, there was a delegate named Kathy Tran who proposed a bill that would allow abortion up until the point of birth. And when asked if a woman could request an abortion, even if she has signs of labor, right? So if she's dilating, she answered that in the affirmative. So I think part of what we need is a culture that affirms life, that sees children as the fruit of reproduction, not as the consequence, quote unquote, of having sex. So that just requires, to me, that is more than just a political fix. I think that comes with sort of some type of spiritual reformation, across the country, and I hope that's the direction that we're moving in.
Well, and I think many of us would also argue that even absent the spiritual recognition of the sacredness of life, it's a scientific question too. You don't have to have a strong faith to recognize that biologically this is a unique human life that should be given its own protections and its own respect.
I agree, and it's ironic that the left claims that it's the party of science, right? If they find a single cell on Mars, they'll say, "Oh, we found life," but then they'll deny that a child is a life at the moment of conception. So uh, it's strange times we're living in. The same people who think that they can say with pinpoint accuracy the effectiveness of cloth masks against a novel coronavirus will sit and tell you, one, that an unborn child is not a life, and two, even when that child is born, that child gets to determine its sex, and that what the doctors say is just an assignment at birth. So these are people who honestly should not be taken seriously, and I hope conservatives step up
Yeah.
to assert both the importance of life, and to your point, the scientific basis on which we make those arguments.
Well, and I also think, as evidenced by this conversation, we require, Delano, we Republican voters, we American voters, need to require from pro life candidates the ability to properly articulate these issues in a very succinct way and in a very clear and cohesive way. Gone are the days of just saying, I'm pro life. No, we need to know what you mean by that, whether you really own that topic, and whether you're really ready to move forward with it. We got to leave it there. Great conversation. Delano Squires over there at Heritage Foundation. More to come on O'Connor Tonight.